Today's video is sponsored by Figure, the largest non-bank home equity loan lender in the US, with over $15 billion unlocked on their lending platform. They're now in the crypto-backed loan space and offering industry-low interest rates when you use your Bitcoin as collateral to get cash. Access interest rates starting at 9.9%, the lowest fixed rate in the industry at 50% LTVs. Whether you're funding a major purchase like a down payment on a home, investing in new opportunities, or even buying more Bitcoin, Figure makes it straightforward and transparent. Visit figure.com/Real Vision or click on my link below to take out a Bitcoin-backed loan with Figure today. Hi, I want to talk to you today about my friends at Bitwise and why they're the best crypto asset manager out there. I've talked on the show often about how crypto is reshaping everything from finance, portfolios, and even macro. Everything's ramping up. We've got tailwinds in DC, interest from TradFi, and growing optimism. But smart investors see all of this and focus on the how. What's the savviest way to seize this moment? And that's why so many investors I know are working with Bitwise today. They've been all in on crypto since 2017. They're OGs. They've got more than 30 products to help investors like you get access to whatever they need or want. They've got a team of more than 100 across the US and Europe, and they have over 10 billion in client assets. You know, a lot of people know Bitwise for their ETFs, how they manage the world's largest crypto index funds and the wide range of crypto ETFs they have. But not as many people realize, Bitwise manages private alpha strategies too, and has SMAs for large investors, and is one of the largest institutional Ethereum staking providers. They really do everything. These guys are true OGs in the space, and they're good friends of mine too. So please go and check out Bitwise. They're really excellent. Go to bitwiseinvestments.com and see all that they've got to offer. That's bitwiseinvestments.com, or just email them at james@bitwiseinvestments.com and let them know that Raoul sent you. Anyway, there's a million ways to access crypto. Explore how you can access it best with Bitwise. And remember, carefully consider the extreme risk associated with crypto before investing. Anyway, thanks so much.
Hey Real Vision viewers, a quick pause to introduce you to today's sponsor, Axelar. Axelar is building the rails for the next wave of global finance. Not just crypto, but the future of how assets move, how markets connect, and how institutions plug into open systems. Think of it this way. Bitcoin brought digital gold, Ethereum brought smart contracts, but Axelar is bringing connectivity, the secure link between your favorite blockchain and traditional financial institutions, rushing to plug in. It's why top-tier firms like Dragonfly, Polychain, Coinbase Ventures, and Binance Labs are backing Axelar, and why global giants like Deutsche Bank, MasterCard, Apollo Global, and JP Morgan are already building on it. If you believe the future of finance is open, programmable, and interoperable, Axelar is the gateway. Want to digest deeper? Visit realvision.com/Axelar or follow on X at Axelar. That's AXELAR, the gateway to open finance.
Let's get some facts. 37% of you aren't subscribed to this channel. That's almost 4 out of 10 just freeloading the alpha. So come on, hit subscribe, and I promise to keep leveling up the show with the best guests and the juiciest insight. Go on, do it now. Hi, I'm Raoul Pal, and welcome to my show, The Journeyman. The Journeyman, as you know by now, is where I travel to that nexus of understanding between macro, crypto, and the exponential age of technology. As you know, we've got two mega forces of technological adoption going on at the same time. Part of my exponential age thesis is that the foundation of it is on two technologies. One is the adoption of crypto, which up until recently was the fastest adoption of any technology the world had ever seen, based on its behavioral incentives of the token prices and the participation in these giant technology networks, not just Bitcoin, which may be a store of value network, but we have all of the explosion of other applications on crypto networks themselves using smart contracts. The other side of the equation was AI. AI is, as we know by now, the fastest adoption of any technology the world's ever seen, and it is the future of not only the economy, but the future of humanity. It is a civilizational changing thing. And my foundational belief is that AI and crypto are the rails that need to be married, and they will be. And I think it's to do with the idea that AI is infinite knowledge, infinite things, and crypto creates scarcity in a digital world. And part of that is identity. One of the biggest pressing problems, and I've been talking about this for about 4 years, is who the hell is human? How do we prove things online? How do we just get rid of the KYC systems and use zero knowledge proof technology? How do we scale ID that it becomes a seamless experience that we own, that we permission, that we can permission ourselves on the internet so we get paid for adverts? The ethos of Web3, but with the massive disruption of AI. That all comes together with World and Tools for Humanity. Worldcoin is something that people saw on the internet and were in horror. This dystopian, it scans your eyeballs and it's taking your biometric data, and this is a big evil empire. The reality was, I actually interviewed the Worldcoin team when it was called Worldcoin and not World, back in Cayman maybe 2 years ago, and I realized that my entire narrative was wrong. I'd listened to a Twitter narrative. When I realized what they were doing and what these orbs actually did and what they were trying to do, I was like, okay, this is super interesting. So I've always wanted to interview somebody about this. So I'm going to interview Tiago to talk about what they're doing, what this network is, why it matters, because I think it's important for you guys to know the reality of what this is all about, because it is of a humanity level importance, not just for them to solve, but for many to solve. Anyway, enjoy it.
Join me, Raoul Pal, as I go on a journey of discovery through the macro, crypto, and exponential age landscapes. In The Journeyman, I talk to the smartest people in the world so we can all become smarter together.
Tiago, welcome to Real Vision.
Thank you so much for having me.
Listen, I'm really excited about this conversation because I've been following the path of what you guys have been doing for a while. There's been lots of confusion and stuff about the space, but I think what you're working on is incredibly important. So I want to dig into that. Just introduce yourself and what you do, and then I want to go back in time and how you got here, because I always like to get people's journeys. How the hell you got into crypto, why are you doing what you're doing, and then we'll talk about what you're actually doing.
Of course. So my name is Tiago. I am the Chief Product Officer at Tools for Humanity. Tools for Humanity is the startup that Sam Altman and Alex Blania started like 5 years ago, with the very simple mission, as the name implies, to build the tools that we thought humanity would need in the age of AI. And so we've built a bunch of stuff. The most famous one of that is this project called World, which we launched 2 years ago, and now it's this big decentralized ecosystem with 100 or more companies contributing to it. We're one of those, and so I'm in charge of all of our products, basically anything that users or developers and our operators are interacting with. We get to work on all of that with our teams.
And what does Tools for Humanity do? What is its purpose, really?
Yeah, so
this is the most important thing about the whole thing, I think.
Yes, and we really didn't bury the lead, right? We just put it right in the name. The way the story goes is about 5-6 years ago, Sam, as they were working on OpenAI and all of these things that eventually became ChatGPT and DALL-E, he realized that AGI, number one, was going to happen, which already back then was a very controversial opinion, but two, that it was going to happen much sooner than people expected. And we believe that that's one of the most important and one of the coolest moments in just human history. It's technology that will change the world and will allow us to change the way medicine and education and so many things work. But there's also some things that are going to break, right? And we're going to have some new challenges, and we're going to need new tools as a society to make sure that we make the most of that technology. And so there's many things, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of those: the economic impact, fair access to AI, trust on the internet, right? How do you know who and what to trust? And so we realized that there needed to be a company focused on just solving those problems. And so we started this company called, as the name implies, Tools for Humanity. And we've experimented with many things. As I said, the most famous one is the World project. But that's basically what we do here.
So give me your story then. So how on earth did you get involved in all of this and crypto and the whole kind of Sam Altman and the whole AI bigger thing? Because it's fascinating.
For sure. So it's been like many of these stories, it's always a windy road. I'm actually from Mexico originally. I grew up there all my life. And eventually I started building robots with friends. We started competing in competitive robotics. It was super fun. I got into that in, I don't know, what was I, like 14 years old, 13 years old. And at some point we won a world championship. And with that, I got the opportunity to come to the US to study college. And so I came here to study computer science and robotics engineering. But like many people nowadays, I dropped out halfway through to start a startup. So I went back to Mexico to start a startup with the friends I used to build robots with. And we built a fintech for Mexico. So you're very familiar with Alipay or like WeChat, very similar to that. It's basically a payments app where you can do QR code payments in stores, send money to your friends like Venmo, or pay for other services like utility bills and things like that. So with that startup, we went through YC. We were like 20 years old. Our CTO was 17 years old. It was super fun. And so that's originally where I met Sam. Sam was still running YC when we went through that. So he helped us throughout the batch with a couple of things. And we loosely stayed in touch. And our paths went in different directions. He went on to leave Y Combinator and focus entirely on OpenAI, obviously doing incredibly well. And we ended up selling our company to then scale it across LATAM. And then after that, I took a sabbatical where I was doing a bunch of random stuff, including getting into crypto. So we can talk about that in a second. But I lived in the desert with friends. I studied ants, and I was planning to start another company when a friend introduced me to Alex, Sam's co-founder. And they told me what they were building with Worldcoin. And I thought, wow, like that's so crazy. And they asked me to join and help get things started. So I joined for 3 months, and I said, okay, I'll join for 3 months, and then I'll go and continue doing my company. And it's now been more than 4 years here. So they got me first saying, come for 3 months, then 6 months, and then it just ended up happening. But it's been honestly the ride of a lifetime. As the years have gone by, this has become the best team I've been a part of. The problem became very real because when we started working on it, it was all like hypothetical. And obviously things are going very well, right? This has always been a moonshot, but the plan has worked surprisingly well. We've grown immensely over the last 4 years. So it's been really fun. And I feel very lucky to be here.
So give us the crypto story. Your crypto story.
So I'll be very honest. I wasn't super into crypto. I first heard about Bitcoin in college, and I really wish I would have bought some Bitcoin. I heard from my roommate, but I was literally counting pennies on a spreadsheet to be able to live. And so I didn't buy Bitcoin, and I wish I did. But after that, when I got into fintech, one of the first questions, this was like 2017, right? And so all of the investors, they were asking us about blockchain. And so we sat down and we looked at, okay, should we build our product with a blockchain? And the answer in 2017 was objectively no. Like you should not build that product if you're trying to ship it today to users with that. And so my job that year became, as we were raising money, I had to become very good at explaining to investors why it didn't make sense to build the thing that we were building with a blockchain and why we had to build it the fintech route. So the truth is, it wasn't until we sold that company where I had some distance for the problem. And as I started thinking about new ideas, I kept hitting this wall where, well, there's this idea and it's a really exciting idea, but if crypto works out, then you wouldn't build that this way. Or if crypto works out, then you wouldn't even need that at all. And so I got to a point where I just had to sit down and say, okay, I need to decide, like, will crypto work or not? Because if it will, then like, what am I doing here building on the old legacy?
Because this is what happened to a lot of fintech people like Mickey Malker, Wences Caceres, they're all South Americans, had all done the same route. And then suddenly, same as you, is like, well, it feels like crypto is the answer.
Yeah, I think I've built probably fintech products for something like 10 countries all over Latin America before being like, yeah, I think like this system like is definitely super broken. And so I gave crypto another shot. So it's probably like 2019 at this point. I reread the Bitcoin white paper, and then I got very much into Ethereum. I really like the idea of not just decentralization, but digitalization, right? Like for me, like the core of the Bitcoin white paper is, while I really like the decentralization aspect of it, when you read it, it's really decentralization for the sake of digitalization. Like a lot of the unlock comes from finally being able to digitalize a lot of things. And that made a lot of sense to me, making money programmable, and then with other kinds of blockchains, making other things programmable and trustless. It's incredibly powerful. And so through that, I slowly started getting into this. And when I heard about Worldcoin, it made a lot of sense that also identity would need a lot of those properties that money does, right? It needs to be global. It needs to be trustless. It needs to have many of the properties that that money would need to have. So it made a lot of sense to me that that the World team back then was thinking about building this as a crypto project.
So, a quick break in your regular programming. If you're serious about your future, grab my free report called Prepare for 2030. I think you've got 5 years to make as much money as possible, and this guide will help you navigate what's coming. The link is in the description. Download it now. So, when they approached you, what was their pitch to you? Because this was pre where we are today with ChatGPT. Like, yeah, it's a big leap of faith. It's like, okay, so what we're worried about is the fact that humans and AI are going to get confused in the digital world, and we need to build for this, and it's going to be based on crypto rails as well. Why did you say yes? What was the pitch?
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of
pitch was
foresight, right?
very similar to what you would hear us go say on stage today, which is crazy, right? And the pitch was basically AI is going to happen, and there's specifically 3 problems that Sam and Alex were very curious about back then that I think are still very relevant. Number 1 is the economic impact of AI, right? We're going to go from the jobs of today to the jobs of tomorrow, right? Like, we probably are going to need to help people some way or another. But even more than that, there's going to be so much wealth unlocked that you have to figure out how to distribute that. 2, there's like the governance question and democratization of AI, right? If these systems get like really powerful, you probably don't want one company or one person to control it. So you have to like start innovating on governance. But without one person, one vote, it's just like a really hard thing to do. Fair access to AI, right? If this is truly going to be such an important technology, how do you make sure that everyone in the world has access to it when it is a limited resource? Because compute is a limited resource. Okay? But then also, and what has turned out to be the first problem that we've experienced, is trust is going to completely break down on the internet, right? That was already a little bit of a problem back then. And so you could see that, you could see the trend line. But when anything can be faked with AI, how do you know who and what to trust? Right? And when you go on Twitter, how do you know if these 20,000 tweets on some really important topic, how do you know if those are one person with 20,000 bots or actually 20,000 people? And so that made a lot of sense. And the really interesting part of it is that all of those problems sound very different. But when you squint a little bit, you really only need one thing to solve all of them and more things that we have, which is you need a network of real humans. If you had a network of real humans, you have the tools that you need to solve all of those and more things. And so then the only question was, okay, then how do you go about making that network of real humans possible from a technological perspective, from an adoption perspective? And so a lot of what we've worked in the past 5 years has been not so much on figuring out what it can be useful for, because to us, and now clearly as things have panned out, it was always going to be obviously useful. The hard part was, how do you make it real? So that's what we spend a lot of our time thinking about.
So we'll dig into a lot of the projects you're working on and developing, but let's go with World first, which first came out, 3 years ago?
So the official launch was 2 years ago, almost to the day. It was, I think, July 24th, 2023 is when the project launched.
And what was the vision behind World, or Worldcoin as it was called then and now called World? What was the idea for that part of this whole project?
Yes. So the idea is very simple. The idea is, if you want to create, how do you go about creating a network of a lot of people? And we took inspiration from PayPal here and from many apps like that. The way companies like PayPal grew is they raised $80 million.
And gave it away.
They took 70 million of that and they gave you away in incentives for you to join the network, try it, and if you like it, you stuck around. Now, that wasn't going to cut it if you wanted to onboard 1 billion or more people. And so what crypto networks allow you to do is you can tokenize the ownership of the network. And instead of raising money to give it away, you can give away the ownership itself. And so we said, well, what if you could take the ownership of this network itself, give away 75% of it, as an incentive for people to try it, as a way to distribute its ownership. And so that is precisely what we did. We created this crypto token called Worldcoin, where we took 75% of that We said anyone can claim some part of this for free simply for being a real human. And that accomplishes a couple of things. First, we use this thing called World ID, which is your proof of human, to know that you will only claim it once. Right? And so we're using, it's a very self-referential thing where in the future, I think what we're seeing now actually is many other projects are doing airdrops with World ID. But in a way, like the first airdrop that you can get with World ID is the one that gives you ownership in World ID itself, which is a very interesting loop there. And so we're bootstrapping the identity, the proof of human side of things. But we also, if we wanted to give everyone a token, we had to find a way to get everyone on chain, right? We had to find a way to get everyone a wallet, and a wallet that was simple enough and useful enough for normal people, not just for power users like myself. And so we also built the wallet. And so as we're onboarding these millions of people to the network, they're getting both a proof of human and a wallet. And that has turned out to be a very powerful combination of primitives, because now developers get to build applications that leverage not just the proof of human, but also the digital finance side of things, right? And so that was a very simple idea. It was, hey, let's create this token that represents ownership of a network. Let's use the proof of human to make sure that each person only claims it once. And by running that massive airdrop on a global level, we're able to bootstrap a network of billions of people where they all end up with a wallet and with a proof of human.
So talk me through the experience of onboarding somebody into this. So they go, they have they come and see the famous orb, which we'll talk about in a bit. It proves that you're a human. What is that whole experience, and why do it that way to onboard people? And how do you get people across the hump of, why am I doing this? And what is this weird stuff that ends up in a wallet? What's a wallet? You know, all of the usual crypto shit we have to go through. Talk me through that whole process, because it's very brave what you did, and you're onboarding a lot of people. We'll talk about that adoption later, but just that whole process of why you did it that way and how you explained it to people.
Yes. So the first thing that's actually very surprising to most people is that the first step is you download an app. It's not you go to an orb. You download an app and you can actually have a World ID and a wallet even without visiting an orb. And so today we have more than 30 million people that have joined the network, and about 15 million of those have verified an orb. That means there's another 15 million people that have joined the network and that are active there, that have simply downloaded the app. They've started using the wallet. They're maybe using mini apps. They maybe have lower levels of World ID verification. And so that's like the first thing. And so the first step on your journey is you get
they're wallet holders, but they haven't gone through the proof of humanhood yet.
They haven't gone through the proof of human, but there's lower levels of verification you can do. So for example, in some countries, we support the ability for you to tap your phone to an NFC passport, and that gives you a lower level of verification than the orb would. And you can imagine that in the future, there could be other lower levels of verification. And so that is the first step. And for a lot of people, that is how they first get into the ecosystem. They understand what is happening. They check it out. They hear about it from their friends. And now eventually you go, well, I want to be able to use all mini apps, and I want to be able to claim my share of Worldcoin, and I want to be able to prove on Tinder that I'm a human. And so for that, you need to have the human verification. And so you have to visit an orb around you. So you use the app, and the app, just like Uber or Airbnb, like helps you find the nearest orb to you. In some countries, that's on malls. In some countries, that's on the street. In some countries, you can even like press a button and the orb comes to you on like a delivery motorcycle. And so it's like very different depending on where you go to the world. And showing up to the orb is actually the quickest part. We can get into a second of why the orb, but just to talk a bit about the experience it takes like 30 seconds. You stand in front of an orb. The orb looks very fancy, but it's basically just a fancy camera that is able to tell whether you're a real and unique human. So you stand apart from it, basically at the distance that you and I are in. For something like 15 seconds, the orb has a little ring light. It goes around, and then it just looks at your face and it does all the checks that you need. Before that, what you did is you actually showed the orb a QR code so that it knows which World ID it's verifying. So when we talk about the technical aspects of all of this later on, that's a very important step, because a lot of people think that World and World ID uses biometrics for identification. That's actually not the case. Your ID is some random private key that lives on your phone and only that. And so when you go to the orb, the way you can think about it is your World ID is like a digital passport that is like a human passport for the internet. So when you go to the orb, it checks whether you're a real human or not. And if you are, it basically stamps your passport as verified. But that stamp doesn't say anything about your biometrics, right? When you go around and you show on the internet, look, I have a verified World ID, you're simply showing that stamp. Biometrics is not used for identification. And so you show up to an orb, you show it your QR code, it looks at you for 15 to 30 seconds, and then it either says, yep, you're a real and unique human, or you're not. And then you're on your way. You can now start claiming stuff on the app. You can use other mini apps. You can use integrations like the Tinder one. And so it's actually the simplest part of the whole experience of World.
And why? I mean, because the orb was either marketing genius or a marketing disaster. I'm not sure. When I met the team in Cayman, we talked about it because everybody got the wrong idea immediately. They said, oh my God, it's retina scans. They're taking our biometrics. They're going to sell them. They're going to do all of this stuff. Everyone's like, this is so dystopian. And that's the narrative around it. When I met the team in Cayman, I'm like, and we started talking about this, I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually very different. Why the idea of the orb? Why do it that way? Why not do a standard human to human, way of proof? And was it a marketing disaster or a stroke of genius or a bit of both?
I think the project would not be here without the orb. It's as simple as that, right? One of the hardest thing when you're building something new is to just get people to care. And I think the orb always had to be iconic for people to care. But on the sentiment side of things, I would actually.
Did you think about that when you're planning? You're a product guy. Did you think, how are we going to make this so it appears on every news headline? It's like we're going to make something that looks like it's for a science fiction film.
We wanted something special. We definitely wanted something special that could help people understand that we were going into a new world and that this was just fundamentally new technology. And so we did think about how do we make it special. Eventually, we landed on the orb because the device represents the world, right? And actually, when you look at it, I don't have one with me right now, but the orbis actually has two halves, and where they come together, that's actually at the exact angle at which the Earth rotates. So there's a ton of engineering, months of engineering that went into making this thing a sphere. Our team would have been much happier making that into a box. It's a lot easier to make a box than a sphere. The PCB is round and all those things. But going back to your other question, I actually think that on the sentiment, that's actually not the case. I think that if you go on Twitter sometimes and certain bubbles, yes, there's a lot of very valid questions, but our experience around the world is that every time we launch in a country is very similar than any other kind of technology. So I'll give you an example. When the iPhone 5S came out, I was still in high school in Mexico, and I had a friend that saw it, and he was immediately, he was like, I'm never getting another iPhone, this biometric scanner, whatever. 6 months later, he had the iPhone 5S. And then when the iPhone 10 came out, I was actually already in YC. He was still in college. And we were talking, and he was like, no, this time I'm never getting an iPhone again. And 6 months later, he had it. And he had it with a little piece of tape. But and then that little piece of tape went away when he actually understood that, look, this is super convenient and it's genuinely super private. And then when Apple announced the Vision Pro with Optic ID, which is the same iris scanning technology that we use, I called him. I was like, so you're not going to get it? And he was like, no, I am going to get it. I get it now. I think that any kind of technology like this has adoption curves. And we've gotten to see that as we launch in each country, right? When you launch in a new country, we spend a lot of time speaking with regulators and with media and with the technology space to explain. And first, you're growing slowly, right? And it's only the early adopters. And as you start building trust, as the network starts being more useful, as people start hearing about it from their friends, you start going mainstream because people understand the technology a lot better. And where that ends up in is we have many cities around the world where we've grown a lot. Lisbon in Portugal, more than 1 in 3 people have verified. Buenos Aires in Argentina, also more than 1 in 3 adults have verified. Kuala Lumpur is more than 1 in 4 adults. And there's a bunch of cities like these where we're farther along that adoption curve. And that is just many things. It's people understanding the project better, is there being more use cases and utility on the ground, and just generally more trust. But that skepticism that you sometimes see on a Twitter bubble or here and there, it's really not the experience of the vast majority of our 30 something.
It can't be, because so many people have done it, right? So it proves that there's a difference between crypto Twitter, which is quite hardcore and difficult to navigate, versus the average person. When you've set up in a mall or a shopping center in Lisbon, what is the pitch to people? Why should they come? Do they come out of curiosity? Do they come for the airdrop? How much is the airdrop? What is the mechanics that gets people to do this? Because it's difficult to explain to people, listen, you're going to be competing with AI online and blah, the big story. They're like, okay, that's too much information. So how do you get them to do it?
Yeah. So, and by the way, on the crypto side of things, I think also the questions are very valid, right? Because I had many of the same questions before I joined the project. Like when you hear there's going to be a biometric system that's going to give you free crypto with like a shiny ball, there's a lot of very valid questions like you should be asking, right? Especially if you're a technical person. And what I really respect is a lot of our biggest advocates are people that were skeptics before, and then they took the time to go in and understand the technology. And they're like, wow, this is not just private. This is like one of the most private and one of the most cypherpunk things I've ever seen in my life, right? But I think the questions are like super valid, right? Because the way you would imagine something like this would be built, if like Facebook built it, for example, is like incredibly creepy, right? And so part of why it took almost 4 years from the time when we started to when we launched 2 years ago was because like building like new technologies, new types of cryptography to make this possible was really hard. Going back to your question on the like what do people hear about? Like the truth is,
how do you get them to join the network? How do you get them to go to the orb and prove that they're humans?
Yeah, it's very simple. It's just like PayPal. You download it because you wanted $20, and then once you have it, the app just does a really good job at explaining you what it is so that you stick around. That's basically the same thing we do, right? Most of people first hear about it because they want to get the ownership in it. They want to get their first crypto. What we hear a lot from people is they feel like they missed out on Bitcoin, or they've always been intimidated by cryptocurrencies. And here's one that they can get for free, and that is all built around a really friendly experience. And so a lot of them come for the token, but then stay for the network, because when they go verify to a location, both the operators explain it, but as they get to experience new things on the app, they're like, wow, this is an incredible ecosystem. And where that ends up is like our retention rates are through the roof.
Yeah, I want to talk about that retention rate. So I'm just going through the journey because it's super fascinating. I'm a huge fan of that PayPal model. I get why you're doing it. It's really clever. The idea of the orb in itself creates a talking point. So, from a product perspective, where you come from, these are very thought out things. So the person joins the network. They've gone to the shopping center in Lisbon. They've got this. They've now got their wallet set up. They've got some worlds in their wallet. What percentage of people actually do anything with it aside from turn it into cash? And how do you get that next step? Because they're now walking away from you. You don't have their email. You can't communicate with them. They're kind of stuck unless they look at that wallet. Mm-hmm. So how do you get that step? The bootstrapping of the network and network activity.
Yes. So there's basically 3 things you can do once you're in the network, right? You can use the wallet for like DeFi stuff. You can send transfers around the world, and you can hold money on Morpho, things like that. Second, you can use your World ID on third-party apps. For example, like Tinder just announced that they'll be using World ID for human verification on their platform. But you can imagine that you could, in the future, use it on social media websites, concert ticket, and things like that. And 3, we have, last year, we released a platform for something called mini apps, which are basically third-party applications that can run right inside of World App. And they integrate in a very seamless way with both your ID and with the wallet. And so today, more than 75% of all activity on the app is one of those 3 things. It is not claiming your Worldcoin. Claiming and like Worldcoin related activity is less than 25% of activity. most activity that we see on the app is people coming to do things. And what those things are, like, it's very, very different depending on the user. There's some people that are playing mini games that are for humans only. There's some people that are using the financial features. There's some people that are participating in polls that are happening that are for humans only. There's a whole universe, a whole platform of things. Just the mini apps that launched something like 8 months ago, they've been opened more than 1 billion times. I think like the stat is something like every 0.02 seconds, someone opens a mini app. So that's a ton of different things that people are doing with applications that developers are building that leverage these primitives.
And what percentage of people onboarded become active users? And how do you measure active users?
Yes, so we'll see which numbers I remember off the top of my head. This is a great pop quiz for Chief Product Officer. But so roughly half of the people that get the app end up verifying an orb. Right? Yeah. A lot of the people that don't verify an orb is because we don't have an orb near them yet. And so a lot of what we think about is how do we deploy orbs in many more places so that the people that want to verify can do that. And then 90 days after, actually, no, it's 60 days after someone verifies, more than 85% of those are still around using the app. Now, if you've ever built anything in consumer, you know that rate is through the roof. That rate is usually like 20, 30, 40% if you're a very sticky product. It is only the most popular products, the ones that you know the brands of, the ones that are always at the top of the charts, are the ones that have 70, 80, 90% retention rates. And that's why World App is always on the top of the chart. If you go right now to any of the countries we're operating, it's routinely at the top of the finance charts and very often at the top of the overall charts in general, because people just like the model works, right? The model of people signing up for an incentive and then getting exposed to this ecosystem where they can do a lot of things. Many users don't even know that it's crypto behind the scenes, and we've put a lot of work to make sure that that's the case. We think that crypto, the benefits for users are amazing, but sometimes the technology sucks. And so we try to abstract a lot of that away. But people now, they can start sending money to their family members across the world in seconds for free. And they can start saving money and actually getting real yield and not getting screwed over like they do in banks. And they can use a lot of apps that wouldn't be possible without proof of human. And so, we're very excited. We're very excited by the metrics.
And so it then splits into the foundation, which looks after the world ecosystem, and then what you're doing, Tools for Humanity. Whose job is it to... So I presume it's the foundation that brings on new people. So they're increasing the network size. When it comes to network activity, i.e. the things that happen on the network, the applications layer, because I think of networks always in terms of Metcalfe's law. How do you create value of a network? It's got to be the number of the square root of the number of users, or number of users multiplied by the total activity value of transactions that happen. Whose job is it to do that part? I know that we'll come into what you guys are doing in a sec, because I think that's going to be the really important part. But it's their job, I guess, to roll out the orb, get it into as many cities, get as many people bootstrapped on, create enough product use for them to find an experience that they use.
Yeah, so I think the best mental model is the foundation is a steward of the protocol, right? And what does that mean? It means some very basic things like managing the treasury, right? Managing the distribution of that 75%. But then it's also stewarding and setting up the rules and the incentives so that the ecosystem can be self-sustaining. And so actually the foundation, for example, does not have physical operations around the world to deploy orbs. The foundation is not building a lot of technology beyond the core protocol itself. What the foundation does is through its grants program or through the protocol incentives themselves, they make the rules so that companies like us have an incentive to do things like build a client. Right? So we built the first world client. It's called World App. And so we have an interest in growing our app, but by growing our app, we're also growing the network. Right? We built the first device that supports the protocol, that is the orb. Now, even though the orb looks very cool, I think that maybe someday someone should build a more varying version of that device. And there are companies working on being able to plug in different kinds of devices to the network. And the same thing applies for the operations, right? The foundation sets up rules, and then around the world, there's different companies or different individuals that take orbs to those places. And so in some countries, we actually as TFH set up locations and we are an operator. But in the most places around the world, there's other local companies or entrepreneurs that are getting orbs and that they're managing the deployments of those there. And so the answer is basically both, right? It's the foundation's responsibility for that to happen, but TFH does that in some places. We build one of the many clients. We build one of the many devices. We are one of many companies that are able to run operations. It is true we are the first, right? We were the first to do it, and we do have a lot of experience on that. But there's now more than 100 companies around the world that do some variation of one of these things.
So the other big part of this is going to be the partnerships. It's the applications layer. Where does it become vital to do? You know, interesting enough, I went down this rabbit hole 4 years ago, and I tried to get together Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and I can't remember who else, get them together in a room. I tried to get all of the people who were the heads of Web3 and said, we need to solve ID really, really, really fast. And they're like, yes, we agree. And then I said, we need a commonality of standards. And they said, yes, and it's never going to happen because we will not accept other people's standards unless forced to by government. And that was quite shocking to me. And these were all the kind of heads of Web3 of all of the big tech companies. Facebook were there as well. And they're like, we just can't do this. So how are you guys going to get over that problem? You've got Tinder, great. Okay, that's a really good use case. But we've got to get everybody to use some form of digital ID, whether it's yours or whether it's zero knowledge KYC stuff. There's a bunch of people working on different elements of this. It's incredibly important. But how do we get people to actually force them to adopt it? Not the end user. The end user's fine. We all need that. But it's getting bloody Microsoft or whoever it is, Facebook, to agree.
So it's very simple, right? It's by solving a problem that they couldn't solve otherwise. And so when I think about a lot of the conversations that we have, a lot of the partnerships that you've seen, and the ones that are on the pipeline right now, they are not with the head of Web3. They're with the CEOs.
Yeah.
They're with the CEOs.
Now it's become a problem.
For many of these companies, they understand there's two problems. There's two things. First, they understand that their products are breaking down. It's an existential threat to their company if they're not able to know what is a human, what is a bot on many of their platforms. And on the other side of things, World has the scale not of a Web3 project, but of a Web2, one of the largest Web2 projects in the world, period. Right? We have real scale that is moves the number in a very real ways for very real companies around the world. And so when you have real scale and you're able to solve a problem that they can't otherwise, the truth is they don't care whether we're using ZK or not. We really care. Right? And we have the ethos of everything crypto related. Companies around the world, they just want to solve these problems. Right? And so what happens when is that by having conversations at an executive level, right, with the actual CEOs who understand these threats to their businesses and they're worried that their platforms are literally going to die if they aren't able to solve it, then the rest of it doesn't really matter, right? And so that's basically, which is very different. And I'll be honest, this wasn't the case when we started, right? And part of why, and we understood that was very reasonable. When we started, those two things weren't true. When we started, people were not freaking out about AI, right? People did not understand how soon and how fast this was going to come. And we also didn't have a lot of users. Right? And so what we said is, okay, we can't really move AI timelines. We just trust that will come. So we'll focus on growing the network. And that was I think a very correct but non-obvious decision that we made, which was, you know what, for the first 2 years, we're going to focus on the technology and growing the network. Because like you said, Metcalfe's law is not just monetary value, it's utility. A network is exponentially more valuable the larger that it is. So why are we going to worry about what's the right use case for 1 million users? There's no use case for 1 million users. Just find out a way to get to 10, 50, 100 million users, and then there's use cases all over the place. Right? And so this is why we focused on the strategy of, okay, let's grow with a PayPal-like model. Let's build the technology, which is going to take years to do, and trust that AI is going to catch up. And the truth, to be honest with you, I think AI has gone faster than we expected. And so now we are trying to catch up and scale the network as fast as the world needs it to be, because AI has moved really, really fast.
Because it's interesting because, as I said, 4 years ago, when I was talking about this, it was the Web3 teams were the only people interested because they understood ZK technology, everything else, and the CEOs didn't care. And my argument with these guys is you don't understand it yet, but cut to 5, 6, 7 years' time, they're going to be suing you. The governments will be suing you just like they sued the banks for decades because of what's about to happen. And they're like, yeah, we know, but nobody will listen internally. But now everybody suddenly realizes how big a problem this is. And particularly with the rise of video AI as well, it becomes urgent. I mean, I'm developing a video chatbot of me. And so this whole setup is gone within 3 to 6 months, where we even know that a Zoom call is not an AI bot anymore because it's real-time chat. And it's already got my voice because I've got so much content online, everything else. So it's happening so fast. People don't yet understand how problematic this is going to be.
Yes. One of my favorite things that has happened for me on the job is I did once an interview for a TV station like this one. And we were talking in the interview about just how real the problem was. I think that the anchor was a little bit skeptical about, oh, do we really need a proof human, whatnot. And we finished the call. It was a great interview in general, but they were a bit skeptical of that. And he looks at me and he was like, be honest with me right now. Are you actually in this call or is this a deep fake? And I started laughing. And yes, I had some really fancy studio lighting and whatnot. So I understand but I just started laughing. I was like, this is exactly what we were talking about, right? You right now in this moment don't have certainty. You don't know if I'm actually here giving you the interview where I'm talking about this problem. Right? Now imagine what this is like for my college friends who aren't technical, or for my sister, or for my mom, let alone my grandma. Right? One of my favorite things that we announced recently is we announced this chat product called Worldchat, which is an end-to-end encrypted messenger, just like Signal, that has like crypto powers behind the scenes. So just like you can attach pictures or whatever, you can also send money, right? And that is just like you can text money. Makes a lot of sense, but it's a very magical experience around the world for free. One of the other things you can do is when you're texting with someone, you can see like, is this a verified human or not? And so you know when you're texting someone, if they're a verified human, the bubbles are blue, and if they're not a verified human, the bubbles are gray. So you have to be careful. And now we're taking a step further where we're launching verified profile pictures. And so you'll only be able to set a profile picture on the app if it matches your real face at the orso. So we're able to do that fully anonymously. And obviously profile picture is optional, so you don't even have to set it up. But the consequence of that is that tomorrow, if my grandma gets a text message with my face asking for $50 because my car broke down, she knows that my car actually broke down.
Yeah, because this is a real.
She knows that I can trust it.
This is a real problem for me. There's thousands of versions of me going around scamming people, doing stuff, and you've got the Twitter verification, everything else. A lot of people don't see it properly, and I was just, when we first started talking, I was thinking, obviously, there's a chat coming because it's so desperately needed to integrate, proof of humanhood. It makes total sense. And because you've got the financial rails as well, that whole integration, Telegram have some of this, but they've got the massive bot problem as well. So, there's a huge issue there on the other side. What about proof of AI? Because that's another way of approaching the same problem, which I think might be important for other networks, whatever that may be, where you don't mind the AI, but you just need it to be verified as AI.
That's a great question. And I think it's completely valid. Sometimes people think that since we are the human network people, that we don't like AI. And I love it. I use it all day, every day. I think bots are amazing. The only problem is that there are some things where I want to know what is a bot and not. And so the way I think about it is there's like three kinds of apps. There's apps, let's talk about like gaming, for example, where you not only want to make sure that that a human only has one account, you want to make sure that the human is actually the one doing the thing, right? That it's not a deepfake or that it's not an AI. And so gaming is a good example where it's not enough that I only have one account.
You're talking about Elon getting somebody else to do the gaming and then take the victory at the end. But yes.
Allegedly,
exactly.
And so in that case, you actually care that the AI is not playing for me, right? Or someone else. But like you say, there's many things. Let's say like buying Taylor Swift tickets. Okay? The problem is actually not that I get an AI to buy 4 tickets for me. The problem is if I buy 4,000 tickets and then I resell them.
That's right.
And so something that we are thinking a lot about and working with AI companies on is the ability to delegate your proof of human. Right? What a lot of websites are facing right now.
For agents now.
Yes.
We'll have agents.
Exactly. With the agents. And like your agent should be able to show up to, let's say, DoorDash or a food delivery app. It should be able to say, hey, I am an agent, but I am representing Tiago. And here's basically like my power of attorney of I get to represent Tiago. So I'm a good bot. Let me in, right? I'm not going to DDoS you. I'm not going to price gauge. I'm not going to do any of those things. And so there's definitely that room in the middle for delegation of your proof of human to an agent on certain kinds of apps. So developers should get to choose, is delegation allowed in your application? And in many cases, it should be. Or in many cases, it will not be, like on gaming. And that's totally fine. And so I think that's definitely something that's going to come, especially as AI agents continue to become more popular. I think that the technology is almost there, but not quite there for agents. But I think that if we have this conversation maybe a year from now, we will be using agents like Operator for a lot of things in our life. And when that is happening, what we're hearing, not just from the users or from the AI companies, but from the websites, is that they really need a way to know which are the good and which are the bad bots. Because what they're doing right now is they just block out all bot traffic with like Cloudflare or something like that, because they don't know what's good and what's an attack. And so they actually want the business. They want to sell you the burger or they want to sell you the concert tickets. So they want to let the good bots in, but they need a way to know that. And the way we think that'll work is by you delegating your proof of human so that it's very similar like a power of attorney.
Or they charge bots, which is the other thing that we think crypto rails will get used for, is bot to bots. Because, you know, as you said, AI is not free. It actually comes with two costs. One is the cost of compute, and the other is energy. You know, and bots need to get paid for, and we will create a huge bot economy within all of this as well at some point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that world is not about making sure that bots don't exist, but world is about making sure that we're able to make the most of that world, no pun intended, and that humans remain at the center of it, right? So the internet should still be designed for humans, and it should be an amazing experience for humans. But we're going to have this new species now that is like all of these bots that are going to be roaming around the internet, sometimes working between themselves, sometimes working with us. It's simply about making sure that we can make the most out of this new technology.
And the flip side that a lot of people don't understand is one of the things I'm so passionate about crypto is we're essentially redistributing wealth via a new technology. And the more people adopt a network, Bitcoin's been the classic example, but it could be world as well, to use that network for its particular benefits, the more the number go up, Metcalfe's law, the more you're actually helping humanity replace income and things from the economic changes that can happen down the road. You know, my general thesis on this is we're currently at about a $3.5 to $4 trillion industry within crypto itself. If you just take the trend rate of adoption, even with the lowering of the adoption rate over time, you get to about 100 trillion within a very short period of time, 8 years.
Yeah.
So
one of the things,
we've got 97 trillion of wealth that's about to be created, and we need to distribute that whilst we've got this other redistribution of wealth and jobs and economy going on. It's a great offset for a lot of what's happening.
Yeah. One of the things that we thought a lot about in the context of Metcalfe's law is I think it's very obvious how World ID or the wallet are significantly more useful and valuable the more people participate on them, right? But another question, and the truth is, like, we don't have the answer. We don't know what happens. It's an experiment. But it's like, what does it mean when half the population is all holding a token, right? Because I don't know what are the latest stats, but when I looked at this a few years ago, it was something like only 2% of the population held Bitcoin, right? And that's incredible. I think Bitcoin is amazing. But then, like, what happens when 10, 20, 50% of the population holds any given cryptocurrency, right? Like, what does that do for cryptocurrencies in general? What does that mean for that crypto token specifically? The answer is, like, we don't know, because it has never happened. But what we hear from exchanges in many of the countries where we operate in is that Worldcoin becomes easily the number 2, quite often most traded asset on their platform as we start getting scale in a country. And often it becomes the number 1 because it's just math, right? Like, many more people have it because they can just get it. And so I don't know what happens with that, but I'm also very curious about what does that mean for a token when 50% of a country is holding it. And so that's like part of the experiment that we're running here.
Yeah, how I've approached this is when you break down the component parts of what AI is going to do, there's, in terms of economics, trend rate of GDP growth is driven by population growth, productivity growth, and probably debt growth. Debt growth stopped in about 2008 because we broke the system. And then obviously aging populations are slowing trend rate of growth everywhere. And we're about to replace those by infinite humans, be it the robots or the AI or the combination of the two. And that creates weird GDP that doesn't accrue to humans necessarily because we're not an active part. Obviously, almost every job that we can think of, we can try and pretend it's not going to have a massive impact, but it's a nuclear bomb in terms of how it affects the economy. There's so much change so fast. And that's all well. Humans are adaptable. And I just think, what is it to be? What is our role? And I know everybody gets asked this question, and it's really simple to me, is there's one thing the AI can't be. There's the one thing the robots can't be, and that's human. And once you think that, you realize that, well, humans organize their complex adaptive societies using communities and a set of memetics rules that we operate within. And whether that's religion or whether it's football teams or whether it's Taylor Swift concerts, these are all human things. They're just humans getting together. You can have people go and watch chess games. What's the point? Because the computers beat the humans every single time, but we go and watch chess. And in fact, it's a $100 million industry of humans. So I think that is the element, is being a human. And what you're kind of doing at the basic foundational level here is giving you income for being a human. And I think this is a much bigger idea than people understand, is humans create value by being humans. And that's, as I said, it's sports teams, it's music, it's religion, it's whatever it may be. And this is a foundational stone. We're seeing it also in all sorts of other parts of crypto as well, where we're finding groups of people. We've seen this in NFTs with art markets. We've seen it all over the place where aggregations of humans create value. And that's what I think is going to happen here.
Yes, yeah. It's really, you're one of the first people that ever brings up Metcalfe's law to me, but that was on the very first deck from World. That's always been the thesis behind this, that what you need to do is you need to build a large network, the largest financial network, the largest proof of human network, and that these things just become super useful and valuable over time.
What else are you working on? What are the bigger projects that you've got? Because once you've got a network, again, back to Metcalfe's law, there's infinite opportunities to build really cool stuff, but you've got to prioritize is what is going to be important now. And, there's that. And then there's, is there going to be an integration with OpenAI and others? Because they've got a billion person network they've built. Well, it's not really a network yet, but it's there, right? The opportunity. So Those are the two things that strike me in my head, because I think we can talk for hours. So I don't want to take up all of your time, but
yes. So there's basically three buckets of things that we're working on. The first one is, and what we spend still the most of our energy in, because of Metcalfe's law that we just talked about, is how do we continue to scale the network? And so there's a lot of things that go into that. Yes, obviously making a lot more orbs, but there's actually the only way to do that is technology. And so, for example, we just introduced a new generation of the orb that it actually is able to connect to your phone and guide you through the verification process. And so instead of there having to be a person helping you with each orb, now we're going to be able to deploy these orbs just like ATMs all over the world, in convenience stores, malls, wherever you go.
Sorry, a quick side question. Why didn't you just use a phone as verification of humanhood?
Oh, we tried. It's human verification is one of these things that sounds really simple. It's really hard. It's really hard. We've tried so many things. We started with the obvious things, like verify a phone number or email and get fancy with that. So that breaks down. We considered KYC, and KYC is just terrible for many reasons. First, half the global population doesn't have an ID you can digitally verify. And that's not just people think that's poor countries. Like, look up just the amount of people that have a US passport. It's ridiculous. It's not privacy preserving at all, but more than anything, you can just fake it with AI. Like both the pictures and then now like the KYC checks with the deep fakes. We talk with so much with banks and financial institutions that they're still going to keep KYC as a compliance step, but they're desperate for a human verification to know that that is a real person doing that and that person owns that identity. We've tried a bunch of like other crazier ideas like web of trust or endorsements, and we've also talked a lot with people that have tried to do this, for example, a place like Facebook with like really like billions of users scaled. And what we've found that they've also found is that it's just really fragile, because if anyone lies at any point in the chain, the whole thing collapses. And now with AI, it's like so easy to just create fake people with fake activity that looks real. And so we just haven't found a way to do that.
How did India do it with Aadhaar?
India is basically
because it's very clever. I mean, that was the largest bootstrapping of an identity network in history.
Yes, I think Aadhaar has had an immense impact on the economy of India. And what I would say is they did it just like World. They use iris biometrics. You go to a site to enroll, and then they build a payment system on top of that called UPI. That's exactly what we're doing in World. Right? We're building a proof of human that you go and you enroll with biometrics, because that's the only secure thing. And then you build a payments network on top of that. You can build other things on top of that. Now, the key differences between World and Aadhaar is Aadhaar, to their credit, is open source, right? Which I don't think they get enough credit for. But it is not privacy preserving. All of your pictures and all of your biometric data gets sent to a server from the government and just sits there, and you have to trust the government. We believe that if you want to build a global system, you should not have to trust anyone. Your data should not be sitting anywhere. Only you should be the custodian of your data. And it shouldn't be possible to issue, you shouldn't have to trust a government to not issue fake identities, right? It should be a protocol where, like everything in crypto, is trustless. So everyone can see what is going on because it's open source, but it's running on chain. And most importantly, that is anonymous, but it's default. And so we spend a lot of time on those primitives. But I think in terms of the impact that something like this can have on an economy, India is a great example. You look at what has happened in India from 2010 when they launched this to today, it's completely turned around the country.
It's staggering. And the other thing that's really interesting, which I guess you can follow and improve upon, is the whole India stack idea, which is basically your digital lockers of anything you want it to be. So then you have a zero knowledge database of anything that anybody needs access to. You can permission them. It's super clever what they built.
Yes, I think it's amazing. What they've shown is that the baseline primitive that you need there is that human verification. And that's exactly what we're doing for the internet, right? We've spent most of our time thinking about that human verification, spend some of our time thinking about the financial layer that comes on top of that with Worldchain. And then now we're also starting to see a third layer of applications getting built on top of these with these external integrations and this mini app ecosystem, which is growing like nothing. Again, not just in crypto. Like the numbers here are, we have more daily active users than the other larger apps like Phantom have in a week, right? And so our numbers, like we don't even compare a lot with crypto. And I think
why does people not know this? That's
because it's just a very different bubble. Like I think, for example, I use Phantom every day. I think it's an awesome product, but it's built for people like me. And there's just not a lot of people like me in the world. Right? It's just as simple as that. It's like, do I like Linux? I think Linux is amazing, but how many people use Linux in the world? Right? People want a simpler experience that is more relevant for their day-to-day lives. And that's exactly what World has been about. It has been about making, without sacrificing on the guarantees of like self-custody and the things that we care about in crypto, how do you make this simple enough and useful enough for people in their real lives? Right? This is why, just as we were talking about the fact that with companies, we'll often talk with the CEO, not with the Web3 guy. Same thing with consumers. They just know that they're getting an app called World, right? And they have an ID and they have a wallet and they have all these things. But when you look at it, it doesn't look like a crypto wallet. And that's by design, right? That means we make some sacrifices. There's a lot of flexibility that you have on a crypto wallet. You can set your slippage and like choose the right token and get to all stable coins. We don't support that, right? We support a few things that we think are great for everyday life. And a lot of our users, what they end up doing is, let's say like 10% of our users, they get so into it that they eventually graduate to power apps like your Phantoms, and that's totally fine. But from a scale perspective, World is already much bigger than most things in crypto, and it'll pretty soon be the largest thing, period.
And to be the largest thing, the obvious thing is solving the problems of these giant companies. You know, a great place to start, the people I started with in this whole conversation was actually LinkedIn. I'm like, this is going to be a utter mess really fast. And it's Microsoft. I'm like, you need to solve this. It feels that, you know, stuff like that, we need that scale of integration of what you're doing into these large Web 2 scale projects. That's the big unlock. Tinder is a great example of it, but it's not the scale of some of these things. And once that happens, that changes everything.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the truth. Behind the scenes, we've always known that there's a threshold where, let's call it like a utility explosion. If you hit some amount of users, and then we always thought we wouldn't be able to get big integrations like this with companies, with governments, until around 100 million users. That was our estimate. And I still think that a lot of magical things happen around that number. Just at the end of April 30, we had an event where we announced a lot of things: new generation of the orb, a new device that is going to be much smaller, like fits in your pocket, a new version of the app, World Chat, all these things. But we announced a lot of partnerships, not just the Tinder one. We announced partnership with Razer, where Razer, the largest gaming company in the world, are now going to start using this to verify humans. In online games, we announced partnerships with Stripe, with Visa, with Kalshi. A few months before that, we've announced MOUs with the governments of Malaysia and Taiwan, where we're actually now working with governments on some of the same questions, right? And so, to be honest with you, I think while I agree with you that eventually what we think is you will be using World ID on every single site and app on the internet, that adoption has started happening a lot faster than we expect. Because as we talked about, we're at 31 million users right now. We thought it would have taken a few more, but I guess it's just like such a big problem that a lot of these governments and companies are also betting that we'll continue to grow and get to a bigger scale.
The problem's increasing by the day. So it's solving your problem of how to scale the network, because the problem is now obvious to everybody. Anybody uses social media, anybody uses any form of online stuff sees the problem immediately.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? That is the thing that really changed the game for us. Was we used to have to explain you the problem and convince you that it was going to be a problem. But since people didn't believe the problem was real, then you pull out the orb and it's like, okay, I don't think it's a real problem. And you're now pulling out the orb. It's like you would laugh, right? But now everyone feels and sees the problem every day. Like we were talking with Tinder, but I personally, I'm often on dating apps and I'm like, wait, this person has 6 fingers. Like, what's going on here, right? Or like I have like tried to get concert tickets to like some of my favorite bands that like very barely tour, and I've missed out because they all went to bots, and I'm pissed that I don't get to see them for like 4 more years because of that, right? And I used to run a fintech with the KYC step, right? I know what people do with fake IDs and things like that to get around that. I don't need a bank to tell me that. People like you, like I hear all the time, like my grandma got a phone call, my aunt got a text message and got scammed. And so the problem, let's not even talk about Twitter, right? Like that's a whole
I didn't even start with that one.
Whole other thing. And so we like review sites, right? It's just everywhere on the internet. Like people get the problem, right? And people understand that. People also understand why all of these other things don't work. Right? Like CAPTCHA is basically a test of like, are you smart enough to solve the puzzle? If you are smart enough, you're a human. If you're dumb enough, you're a bot. Well, now the bots are smarter than us, right? And so people get it, people feel it, and so just like companies are desperate for these, like people are desperate. One of the best examples I've heard that was very surprising for me earlier this year when we announced Razer, we ran a couple of surveys with them in different countries. So in the US, I think it was something like 71% of people, gamers, are very concerned about AI. Like, okay, you're concerned, so what? The stat that was crazy was that more than 20% of those gamers have stopped gaming many of their favorite games because it's just not fun anymore. And when you actually then go in and talk to those gamers and to the gaming studios, then you realize the gaming studio is super concerned that they're losing 20+% of their business because it's just not fun anymore. And they're worried that's going to go much higher. But then you talk to the gamers and they're like, dude, I poured in 3 years of my life into this game, right? This was my, I play football, right? That was my identity. And now that's gotten taken away by bots. And so people really, truly feel these things.
Yeah, because it's the same. People don't understand. It's exactly the same as saying chess tournaments can have AI. Well, what's the fun? Because you're going to lose. Because you're competing against AI, which is superior intellect than we have as humans. So, and people don't realize that. That's exactly what happens with online gaming. You just say, that's it, I'm out. What's the point?
It's like saying that you can use a motorcycle on a 400-meter relay in the Olympics, right? Motorcycles are awesome, but you shouldn't be allowed to use it on the 400-meter relay. It's just as simple as that. The 400-meter relay is really fun. It's like takes a lot of skill, a lot of dedication. Like just because you're going to go faster on a motorcycle doesn't mean you're not going to keep doing the Olympics, right?
So, final question for you is, as we talked about in the very beginning, this is not going to be a one-player rules all. It's not going to be, and nor do we want it to be, one ID for everybody on the planet. There has to be a level of interoperability. I mentioned to you in the beginning, I'm on the SWE Foundation. Obviously, they're all ex-Facebook. They understand the massive scale and the problem involved, and they have some great ZK technology that they're building out, and everybody else is trying to address this. Anybody serious in the space is trying to address some of these issues. How do you think about interoperability? Because crypto has been terrible for that, and we have to get there somehow.
Yes, so
because if not, we're going to get the same problem that I had with Microsoft, Facebook, and all of those guys that are saying we're not going to accept your ID versus this ID.
Yes. So one of the things that surprises people a lot is that even though we have our own blockchain, right, it's called Worldchain and Ethereum L2, we deploy World ID and we deploy many of these things to other networks, right? And you can use the protocol even without using our chain. And the same thing applies for the credentials, right? As we were talking about, one of the things, so we said we're focusing a lot on growth, a lot on utility, and a lot on decentralization. That decentralization bucket, we recently put out a paper that I recommend people check out. Talks a lot about how we imagine World ID working with multiple credentials, right? Whether it's other proof of human issuers from other devices, or even just other kinds of credentials like issued by governments or issued by other people like Facebook or whoever it is. Because Tools for Humanity is not going to be issuing the one credential for everyone, right? What we need is rails that we can all agree with, standards that we all can agree on, and then like build protocols around that. And so we think a lot about that. And for us, it's not even just philosophical about decentralization. It's also very practical, right? If you want to grow, if you want adoption for a product or for a protocol, you have to be able to align its incentives with like everyone else in the world, right? And so you don't go to a country and you tell them, hey, we're going to replace your ID. First of all, because we can't even do that. But even if we could, like, it's much better to say, hey, like, let's support your ID on this protocol and let's figure out how we make that working together. And so even just from an adoption perspective, we think it's much smarter to have support for many kinds of credentials by many kinds of issuers rather than only ours.
But you know how smart people are in this space and how arrogant they tend to be. When you go to another protocol and you like, hey, listen, why don't you use our tech for this part and you build what you're doing? Do they not normally turn around and say, well, we can do it better? Because it's a standard answer in the space, as opposed to, great, you've built that, we'll just bolt it on, let's go. They always think, everybody thinks, well, we might as well just build it better.
I think that was the case at the beginning. I think that, again, as the network has started to grow, right, people want to be able to get that momentum, right? Like the reason people are building these integrations and these mini apps and people are deploying World ID on other chains, or people are hopefully soon going to start deploying credentials with the protocol is, at the end of the day, they want to win. And like world is growing so fast that, yes, you can have all of these technical discussions that you want, but do you want access to 30 million users or not? Right? Do you want people to like start using your thing tomorrow or not? And it's not even that we don't want to. It's just like it's very simple. Like if you're compatible with this thing, we're able to surface you, and a lot of people are hungry for things to do. And so, I think that's some of it. I think honestly, also what people ask us a lot. Well, why doesn't Facebook or someone else do something like this? It's such a pain in the ass to be honest. Like building a hardware device, manufacturing those things, shipping it around the world. Real world operations are messy. Building all the cryptography is so hard so that it can run not just on an iPhone, but on a 10-year-old Android. And building all the privacy tech is like really hard what we do. And so I think that we've done a good job at staying slim enough, like leaving room for partners to build their businesses. And for us to focus just on what we're really good at, which is building this human and financial layer and getting a lot of people to adopt it.
And I asked you the question before and you kind of ignored it, and maybe you'll ignore it again, and that's fine. But OpenAI has close to 1 billion users. It's the fastest scaling of any business in history. Why not partner with them? Because obviously Sam saw the problem. It's the same people, the same playing field. It just feels like the obvious way is an integration, that wallet, that experience, and the chatbot is like victory immediately.
Yeah, maybe something like that could make sense. Obviously, even if we were doing something like that, it's not like I could.
No, obviously, but it's just obviously in everybody's mind. But when I first learned about you guys, the first thing is like, this is needed, and okay, there's OpenAI, which is scaling so fast.
Yeah, I mean, without being too cute, I think there's a lot of overlap in our missions, just like there's a lot of overlap with other AI labs missions. Right. I think that a lot of the things that we talked about, like for example, delegating of your World ID, makes a lot of sense that I will work with a lot of AI labs on that. And yeah, look, obviously we share a founder in Sam with OpenAI. I don't know what kind of partnerships we'll have or not.
No, but, I mean, it makes sense even from the open source networks, the open source AI company. I mean, they all need something like this.
Yeah. Yes. And I think it's also important that like World is like neutral and is able to solve the problems for every one of those companies, right? And that it's an open protocol. And so, yeah, like, do I think there's a lot of opportunities to collaborate with companies like that? Yes.
Yeah, because in my head, I just think of how do you build the nodes in the network and how do you build the super nodes? And, obviously OpenAI could be a super node, as could all of the other AIs, as could the LinkedIns and the social medias, as could, my head just goes, okay, where is the large scale growth for a network of this type because of the utility that it provides, which is, what's so interesting about it has a very specific mission, but it's a network, so all sorts of things can get built on that, but it's very specific and clear to people what you're trying to do, which is amazing, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, would certainly be cool.
Tiago, fantastic. Really, really interesting conversation. I think it's really important what you guys are working on and how you're solving it. I think it's really clever how you've gone about some of this stuff as well. And I think most people in the crypto world don't really understand it. But, you know, when I spent time with the team from the foundation in the Cayman Islands, I'm like, okay, this is much more interesting than people understand. And, you know, so well done you guys. And let's see what you build out of, you know, proof of humanity now as well. Because I'm sure there's a lot of really not only interesting applications but useful ones too.
Yes, and thank you so much for the time. This has been awesome. It's flown by. I just looked at the time. I thought we were 30 minutes into this. Thank you so much for the conversation. This has been super fun. And so obviously, if people are curious about this, they can just check the website. All of it is open source. You can go on the GitHub and even look at the org schematics. It's actually quite cool to nerd on.
And what's the website?
It's world.org. And for developers that are interested in building apps on top of this, it's super simple. You can build a mini app in a matter of hours. These are just web apps, and many of them have millions of users already. So I think I was hearing a stat that actually I'll not name which one, but there is a mini app that is a wallet that is like that wallet mini app inside of World is already like one of the world's largest 5 wallets, period. And it's a mini app inside of World, right? Which is just like crazy to think about. And so, yeah, if you want to build on that, also world.org or developers.world.org, you can learn more about how to build.
Fantastic. And we will check in with you, you know, in another year's time or 6 months' time and find out, because it's all, you know, people are starting to understand the scale of the problem, and, you know, your speed of execution is actually important now as well. So it'll be very, very interesting to see where this goes. So thank you for all of that.
Of course, yeah. And let's see where things are in a few months.
Perfect. So, look, I could have spoken for hours with Tiago. There's a lot we didn't talk about, but what you can see is, interesting enough, we spoke the same language of Metcalfe's law and understanding what the network is and its value and how it accrues value and how to create super nodes on the network that bring more nodes onto the network, all of these things. The point being is, what these guys are doing is important. They probably have the right connections, I would imagine, considering Sam Altman was the co-founder. But they understand the scale of the problem. And for me, this problem only gets solved not by one participant, which is them, but the adoption of multiple technologies and protocols all working together and using best practices from each other. Interoperability has to happen across all of what we're doing for any of this to work, because not one protocol can invent everything, all the technologies needed. It didn't happen on the internet. We scaled with different parts, and we'll do the same here. Anyway, super interesting conversation. I'll definitely catch up with Tiago maybe 6 months or a year's time to find out where this is going, because you can see by now how fast all of this is happening. The network adoption of crypto is still going exponential, and we're seeing the network adoption of AI basically being not just Metcalfe's law, but maybe Reed's law, which is Metcalfe's law squared, which is incredible. Anyway, take care out there. And remember, verify everybody you speak to online, because soon you won't know. And there's enough bots of me scamming people, which aren't me. Yes, I have a blue check and all of that stuff. Please double check everything. Trust nobody anymore, because the world is changing faster than you imagine. Anyway, take care out there. So you obviously liked this video enough that you've got to the end. That's quite a big task. But listen, do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe button, and also check out what video's next, because I think you'll love it. But if you want even more, and when I'm talking more, I'm talking about member-generated ideas, incredible alpha, research, everything there to help you in your journey, just head to realvision.com/join for the best financial intelligence out there and the pure alpha that's within the platform.